If you ever go to an amusement park, you will find that one of the staple rides at a park is the roller coaster. And there's all sorts of different types of roller coasters and amazing roller coasters. But today, maybe you've never been on a roller coaster, but today I'd like us to go on a little roller coaster ride this morning. So go ahead, hold your hands straight up. But this wasn't what you were expecting to do on a Sunday morning in worship. Here's what you're going to do. We are going to go on a roller coaster ride together, and you are going to mirror what I do. So when I go left, you guys go right. When I go right, you guys go left. When we go back, you go back. When I go forward, you go forward. And we're going to shout and do it all together. Okay, you guys ready? Oh, we're almost to the top. So you can see over. Whoa! Whoa, 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 whoa. All right, give yourselves a round of applause. You can now say that you have been on a roller coaster in church, no less. But my guess is that this is not the first time you've been on that ride. Because life is kind of like one big roller coaster where it's full of ups and downs and lefts and rights and twists and turns. Sometimes we are at the top of the roller coaster, we're at the highest highs, where we are in the light, where things are full of excitement and joy and happiness, where you have a family vacation or a family reunion, where you fall in love and you get married, where you have a child. High highs. But before long, it's not too long, where those highs drop down to low lows, where you're in the night, where you're in anguish, tragedy, distress. A family member goes into emergency surgery. You experience a miscarriage. You get laid off at work. Life is full of ups and downs, highs and lows, a roller coaster of different emotions and feelings. And maybe this year, as you enter the Thanksgiving time, where it's supposed to be a time of excitement and joy and celebration, maybe this year at Thanksgiving time, it's not where you're at the top of the roller coaster, but you are experiencing the bottom while everyone else around you is not. It might be that this year is the first year where your father, your mother, or one of your siblings has died. And this will be the first Thanksgiving that you will be there without them. You won't see their face this year. You won't hear their laughter this year. You won't feel their presence this year at Thanksgiving. It might not be that, but maybe what it is you are facing certain mental health challenges right now. Maybe you have severe anxiety that's leading you to just be paralyzed in any action you want to take. Or maybe you are in a deep depression, one that just drains you of all life and energy as you go on day after day. It might not be that, but maybe what it is this year is it's family distress. Maybe this past election year, this election cycle has caused some division amongst your family. And you're going to have to go to Thanksgiving and deal with that, or not deal with that because they're not around with you anymore. Or maybe this year you had a divorce and you're trying to navigate what that looks like. Or maybe your parents have had a divorce and you're trying to figure out what that looks like. Life is full of ups and downs, and some of us here, we are at the bottom of the roller coaster in a time that should be much different than that. And maybe you're not there yet, but those highs never stay high. And there will be a time in the future where you will come back down into the night. For those of us who experience this exhausting, never-ending roller coaster of life, what can we do? How do we navigate that? What should we posture ourselves in? And I think there's a prayer in Scripture that might be able to help us out. This is a prayer that the people of Israel as a community would pray together when they were at the bottom of the roller coaster, when they were feeling life's most distressing and anxious times. Israel had very much known what the roller coaster of life was like. There's whole stories full of ups and downs and twists and turns. You can look at it throughout the Old Testament. We looked at some of it last week, but there was downs like they were enslaved to Egypt, and then all of a sudden they were freed from slavery, and then all of a sudden they were in the wilderness for 40 years, and then all of a sudden they were entering the promised land, and then God gave them kings to rule them, but then those kings became wicked, and they didn't follow God's commands well. And then eventually their wickedness led the people of Israel to split into two separate kingdoms, the northern kingdom Israel, the southern kingdom Judah. And then it just kept getting worse, because in that lowest point, it got even lower, because then the Babylonian Empire came into Judah and they ransacked it all. They pillaged the land. They destroyed Jerusalem. They burned God's temple to the ground. And in doing so, they also took the people out of their homeland and exiled them to Babylon. But the down was not low for long, because 70 years later, after 70 years of crying out to God, God heard their cries and God rescued them back out of Babylon. Cyrus of Persia, the king Cyrus, he sent them free, and all of a sudden Israel was able to go back home. It was another high point in their time. But that high point didn't last, because we read that as they were entering back their homeland, they ran into a problem. Their land was full of drought. Their land was not producing the crops that they needed. And if something didn't change soon, they would die out. The people of God would be no more. And it was in that moment of deep distress, that moment where they are in the bottom of the roller coaster, that they call out this corporate prayer to God. This prayer that I think will speak to us as we try and navigate this never-ending roller coaster of life. And here's what this is. It's a prayer that's actually written in the form of a psalm. And this psalm has two halves, two themes that we'll look at this morning. The first half shares with us how Israel calls out to God by remembering his faithfulness in their past. They celebrate in joyful adoration that God had done great things for them before. And I think that's a reminder for us that when we are in life, we can look back and remember God's faithfulness. That we can see in our life the way God has acted and moved in our life before. If you want to see this for yourself, join me in Psalm 126 this morning. Again, that's Psalm 126. We're going to read the first three verses, and as we read these three verses, notice that Israel, that the people of God, are looking back and they are seeing how God has moved in their past, that he's restored them before. Here's what they say. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Our mouths were filled with laughter then, and our tongues with shouts of joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord had done great things for us. We were joyful. Israel, they look back to a time where God restored their fortunes of Zion. As your translation may read, they restored your captives. Zion is another word, another title for Jerusalem. And they're looking back to a time whenever God brought them out of exile into their land again. And as they're looking back, they have all sorts of emotions and joys. I mean, for 70 years they called out to God, "How long, O Lord? Please rescue us. Please bring us home." And finally, after 70 long years, God said, "Come on back home." And so it was like a dream to them. They were like, "Pinch me, is this real?" They were overwhelmed with joy and emotions as they quickly and immediately were shifted away back to Israel. And in doing so, they were celebrating the whole way long. You can practically imagine what they must have been feeling as they experienced this moment. As they sing praise to God and worship of what he's done, as they dance on their way back through, as they shout with adoration and joy, and they celebrate as they trek from country to country until they make it back home. And as they're sojourning through these neighboring nations, everyone in the nations are looking at them and recognizing that Israel's God, the God Yahweh, is doing great things in their life. That he has done an unimaginable act, that he's brought them back from exile. And friends, Israel recognized that they can look back and remember what God had done in their past. And what it reminds me, and what I hope it reminds you, is that our God, the God we worship, is not a God who just created things and then just went on to do his own merry little thing and just let us do our own thing. Our God is a God who acts in history. He is a God who acts in our life in a very personal and intentional manner. Our God is the one who has acted in Israel's life, and we can look back and see and remember the times where God was faithful to us. Now we can sense God's faithful presence throughout our life in the highs and in the lows. That we can look back in our life and see that our God has done great things for us. And sometimes we can see the way God has done great things in the big and obvious ways. It might be that God answered a prayer in your life. It might have been a prayer for healing in some way or for protection in some way. Or maybe you were in financial trouble and financial difficulties, and someone, without knowing anything about your situation, came by and was able to help you out in a way, in circumstances that just don't make sense without there being someone overseeing it all. Sometimes we can look back and we can see God do great things in our life in big and obvious ways. But sometimes God does great things in our life in the small and quiet moments. It might be something as simple as you have the energy to get up out of bed one morning. Or it might be that God has worked in your marriage. Now, on a marriage anniversary, you guys are looking back, reminiscing through the years of marriage you've had and how God has allowed you to keep your stability, keep you together, grow in intimacy, despite some of the rough patches that you've had throughout. And you can look back and you can see, man, God has been faithful in helping us in our marriage. We can look back in our life and we can remember and see the way that God has been faithful to us, the great things he has done in the big and obvious ways, but also in the small and quiet moments. And those are moments that are worth being joyous about, worth celebrating. And when we share those moments together, as we celebrate with one another the great things God has done in our past, what ends up happening is that people on the outside, people who don't follow God or believe in him, look in and they say, I don't quite buy that God is the one that did all these, but I see that something's different in your life. And I want this unimaginable joy that you have. And it opens a door for us to witness to the world. And so just as Israel corporately celebrated what God has done in their past, we are going to do something like that right now. Here's what we're going to do. For the next 3-ish minutes, I want you to talk amongst yourselves next to you and remember the things that God has done in your life in the past. The ways that he has been faithful in the small moments or the big moments. And just for a few minutes, just share with each other to celebrate and have joy about some of the things that we have been able to see in our life, how God has been faithful. But don't share just to boast about something or be prideful or to build yourself up, but share for the purpose of us recognizing that our God is an active God who works in our life time and time again. So go ahead and share with one another for a few minutes. We can look back in our life and we can celebrate and remember the moments where God has been faithful. That God has done great things in our past time and time again. And those are moments worth celebrating. But these big moments, these great moments of joy, don't last forever. Because as we know, because we've lived life long enough, these high moments are bound to become low moments at some point. And for some of us in this room, we are in a moment where we are experiencing the bottom of the roller coaster, where we are in the night, where you are feeling empty on the inside perhaps, or where you have anxiety perhaps, or where there is something else that is creeping into your life that's causing you to be low. And as you are down here, when we are experiencing the bottom of the roller coaster, it's really difficult to look ahead and see moments where we'll have joy again. Sometimes it feels impossible for us to see God move in our life again. But I think that's where the second half of this psalm comes in. Because what we see next is that Israel stops looking back and seeing God's faithfulness, but they start looking forward to God being faithful again. And what we will be reminded of is that we can look ahead to anticipate God's faithfulness once more. That just as God has done faithful, great things before, God will do faithful, great things in our life again. Here's the prayer that the psalmist and the rest of Israel lifts up in verse 4 and following. Restore our fortunes, Lord, like water courses in the Negev. Those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy. Though one goes along weeping, carrying the bag of seed, he will surely come back with shouts of joy, carrying his sheaves. Israel is essentially saying, God, look at the great things you have done in our life. You have been so good to us. Please, God, do it again. Be faithful to us once more. Just like the deserty Negev gets all lush and green during the rainy, wet season, please flood us with your goodness and with your greatness. And so the psalmist in Israel, they look ahead in anticipation for God to move in their life again. Notice how this psalm ends. It's not with them just asking God to work, but it's with them expecting God to work. That they know that God will be faithful to them again just like he had before. That it's like a farmer who plants seed. That the farmer, he plants the seed, he cultivates it, he watches it, he watches the rain come down and water it. And as that happens, he sees that it grows into a plant. And eventually, he knows that this plant will one day become a plentiful harvest, sheaves of crop. That this is not something that he has wishfully hoped for, but he has confidence. He expects this to happen. And in the same way, friends, we can also look forward. We can anticipate. We can expect God to move in our life again. That he was faithful before and he will be faithful again. And out of this psalm comes a beautiful truth. A posture that we can hold ourselves in no matter where on this roller coaster of life you are on. And it's simply this. We can look forward in hope by looking back in joy. That we can expect God to do great things in our life again because God has done great things in our life in the past. We can anticipate his faithfulness in the future because he has been faithful to us before. We can look forward in hope by looking back in joy. And maybe, I don't know where you are in life right now, what your situation is today, but maybe you're at the bottom of that roller coaster where you are having anxiety or depression, or where you are experiencing marital difficulties, or maybe it's something else entirely. But right now, you can look forward in hope by looking back in joy, that this is a season that God will take you out of, back to the top of the roller coaster one day, because God has done it before. But maybe you're not at the bottom of the roller coaster, but maybe you're somewhere up at the top somewhere. And if that's you today, praise God. God has been faithful to you, and he will continue to be faithful to you, and you can celebrate that. And what you can do is you can look forward in hope that one day, whenever the time comes, whenever you will inevitably be at the bottom of the roller coaster, you can look forward in hope that God will be faithful to you then, because you can look back in joy at days like today, and days years ago, at the way God was faithful to you before. But what the psalm reminds us here, what Israel shares with us, is that wherever we are in life, we can look forward in hope because we can look back in joy. That the God who has done great things before will do great things again in your life. And this is a beautiful psalm. It's a corporate psalm. It's something that we can do together. That just as we looked back together, we can look forward together. And so we're going to practice this today, this morning. Here's what we're going to do. The band's going to come up, and they are going to sing a song called Do It Again by Elevation Worship. And really, that song is the heart of what this psalm is. That God has been faithful before, he has done great things before, and he will do it again and again and again and again. But as they are singing this song, I don't want you to immediately get up and sing with them. Instead, you have a paper that you received this morning, and then you have a pen in front of you. As they are singing and playing this song this morning, here's what I would like you to do. I would like you to write a prayer to God. You may have never done that before, but this morning as they sing, I want you to write a prayer to God that models the Psalms prayer that we just read. I want you to start by looking back in joy. Tell God about the ways that He's been faithful in your past. Celebrate the ways that God has done great things in your past. Write them down and look back in joy. But then during this second half of the psalm, I want you to look forward in hope. I want you to look ahead to the day where God will be faithful to you again. Maybe today you need to write down your current situation and moment. That as you write, you share with God that where you are in life, maybe you're at the bottom of the roller coaster, and you share with God that the deep distress you're in and the anxieties you have or the fears you may have. And what I want you to do is share that with Him. But don't stop there, but ask Him to be faithful again. Look forward to when He will do great things in your life once more. Look forward in hope. And as we do this, as the song is played, as we sing this together, I want you to write this song, write this prayer, and then after this prayer is over, what I want you to do next is I want you to put to the side, stand up, and then continue to sing and praise God as we sing Do It Again together. Because God has been faithful before, He's done great things before, and He will do it again and again and again.